I want to thank all of you for being here. I'm honored to be here with my colleagues, Senator John McCain, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Senator Richard Burr, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and Senator Lindsey Graham, who is also a very active member of both the Senate Armed Services Committee and is the chair of the Appropriations on Foreign Aid within the Appropriations Committee. Today we have come here to talk about a very important issue. The primary purpose of our government, of course, is to keep the American people safe, and we have not seen a detention and interrogation policy from this administration that ensures that those we have captured on the battlefield and those who are terrorists who have sought to do harm to us and our allies are being detained and fully interrogated. And this, unfortunately, our prayers go out to all those who are victims in Paris, but we have seen time and time and again, it's so important that when we capture a terrorist or anyone who is working with them, that we ensure that we get the maximum amount of information to protect our country and to keep not only America, but our allies safe. Today, I want to talk about what the administration has been doing to fulfill really a campaign promise made by the president, which was to close Guantanamo. And it's one thing to make a campaign promise, but if you look at the security situation that we're facing around the world right now, now is not the time to be emptying Guantanamo with no plan for how and where these individuals are going to go, no assurances of security of those who have been released. And frankly, what we have seen since May is the administration has released 27 detainees from Guantanamo Bay. Last month alone, the administration transferred 15 detainees out of Guantanamo. And who are these individuals? Well, one of the problems we're facing is that the administration has not been fully transparent with the American people about who is being released and what conditions, once they're being released, are they being held or not held in. And so one of the things our legislation will do today is, while respecting sources and methods and classification where necessary to protect our intelligence, is more transparency to understand how the individuals who are being held at Guantanamo are designated, what risks they present to us, and when they are transferred, are they transferring high-risk individuals. In May, we saw the administration transfer the Taliban 5 to Qatar, and we know the background of those individuals. One of them was reported to be the Taliban Deputy Defense Minister, senior-most commander in northern Afghanistan, who was involved with the massacre of hundreds of ethnic minorities. Another was reported to be the Taliban's chief of communications. Another was said to be directly associated with Osama bin Laden. And while another was reported to be the former deputy head of the Taliban intelligence. On November 5th, the Obama administration released a detainee to Kuwait who was reportedly arrested for connections to al-Qaeda and affiliated with one of the most infamous jihadi recruiters in the United Kingdom. On November 20th, President Obama released 5 detainees to Slovakia and Georgia. These detainees the administration transferred reportedly included members of al-Qaeda or affiliated groups who participated in al-Qaeda operations both in and out of Afghanistan. One of these terrorists was reportedly assessed by the Defense Intelligence Agency as among the top 52 enemy combatants posing a significant threat of re-engaging in terrorism. On December 7th, President Obama transferred 6 detainees to Uruguay. Some of these former detainees are reported to have links to al-Qaeda, including ties to a key al-Qaeda facilitator and senior explosives trainer, whose information was found on the hard drive of the self-proclaimed mastermind of the September 11th attacks against our country. U.S. officials have stated that these 6 men would be treated as free men. In other words, what we're learning is the people that are being transferred, some of which I've described some of their background to you, that there haven't been conditions placed on the ground, either that they're being detained or that we have assurances that they won't be able to get back in engaging in terrorist acts against us or our allies. On December 20th, President Obama released 4 Afghan detainees who have reportedly been handed over to their families for repatriation. Some of these former detainees are reported to have been previously assessed as high risk for re-engagement to terrorism, have ties to the Taliban, have attacked and planned attacks against U.S. forces. And on December 30th, very close to New Year's Eve, President Obama released 5 detainees to Kazakhstan. One of these detainees reportedly received militant training at Al-Qaeda training camps, was captured at an Al-Qaeda safe house. Another was reportedly captured alongside an Al-Qaeda commander at Tora Bora. So where does this leave us? Where this leaves us is we have seen this administration transferring, to try to fulfill a campaign promise, transferring detainees that have been designated either previously or currently as medium or high risk for re-engagement in terrorism. Those that have been released from Guantanamo by not only this administration, but the Bush administration as well, if you put those numbers together, we have almost a 30% suspected or confirmed cases of re-engagement of terrorism of those who have been released from Guantanamo. This problem is one that we should not be presenting the world as we see it right now. If you think about the security challenges we face around the world, to release high-risk designees of detainees who have a high risk of re-engagement in terrorism or medium risk, we should never have a member of our military or someone who is one of our allies reconfronting one of these individuals who we previously had in custody. We know that 2 of the terrorists that were involved in the Paris terrorist attacks are associated with Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and the headquarters for Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, of course, is in Yemen. And Yemen is one of the most dangerous countries basically it's the wild, wild west for terrorists right now. And between September and December of 2014 alone, just a 3-month period of time, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula reported and claimed responsibility for 149 attacks in Yemen. Just 6 days ago, a suicide bomber killed more than 50 people at a police academy in Yemen's capital. I have a 10-page list of terrorist attacks, violence, and prison breaks from Yemen. Almost 5 of those pages have just occurred in January of this year. So our legislation is straightforward. The administration has not presented a plan that can assure the safety and security of the American people when detainees who have been designated medium or high risk for re-engagement in terrorism are released. And so our legislation would put a moratorium on the transfer of these medium and high risk detainees. Because of the security situation we're facing around the world, because of the 30% re-engagement rate of those who are suspected or confirmed of re-engaging in terrorism, it's clear that we need a timeout so that we do not reconfront the terrorists that we had captured and are currently in Guantanamo. Our legislation would also prohibit for 2 years the transfer of any Guantanamo detainees to Yemen. And in fact, this is an important provision because of all the attacks I told you that have occurred in Yemen, the connections we know to Yemen with the recent events in Paris. The last thing we should be doing is transferring detainees from Guantanamo to a country like Yemen. And why is this important? The administration had lifted the ban on transfers to Yemen, and in fact, of the 127 detainees left at Guantanamo, 81 of them are from Yemen. And we have not received assurances from the administration that they will not seek to transfer anyone to Yemen, despite the wild, wild west nature of what we're facing when it comes to terrorism in Yemen. The legislation also that we'll be introducing will establish and reinstate the standard that was in place in the defense authorization from 2013 for international transfers for detainees. And that standard is a common sense standard that would require the administration to really look at not only the re-engagement rate, but the issue of have the countries that they're thinking of transferring people to actually had cases where people have re-engaged in terrorism. And these standards were common sense standards, and we'll reinstate them in this legislation. Finally, I mentioned transparency. Transparency is so important. You know, to release these Afghan detainees right before New Year's Eve, and for the American people not to understand the risk factors of the detainees that are being transferred, what they have been alleged to have been involved in, and what assurances do we have that once a detainee is transferred by this administration to another country, that that country is actually going to be engaged at all in either holding that detainee or ensuring that those detainees don't get back into the fight and present threats to us, our men and women in uniform, and our allies. And we need transparency so the administration can explain to the American people what they're doing, because I believe that the American people have a right to know when dangerous terrorists are transferred from Guantanamo, where they're going, and what are the conditions upon which they are going there to ensure that they don't get back in the battle and harm us or our allies. With that, I'm honored to introduce the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee,